Hi everyone, my name is Arturo Cortez. I'm from Chile, South America, and I also belong to the team of Shanghai Metal. So we are still providers from China. As you have seen before, we have several type of products, and in this case particularly, I'm gonna talk to you about the sandwich panel line. Okay, we're gonna talk about today what are the sandwich panels, what kind of sandwich panels we have, how we can identify the sandwich panels, and of course how you can describe what do you require in a sandwich panel, such as for example the steel layer, the insulation, the density, and so on and so forth. So it's good to know you for you that you can pay attention along the presentation. So actually you can have any questions, just let us know and we will be glad to reply you. So let's start first about the different family of products. Well, as you can see here, we have four different family of products. The first one is the glass wool sandwich panel, the one on your left, the raw wool sandwich panel, the PUR, PI, and the EPS sandwich panel. Well, in these four different categories, well, it's really important that you might understand that each type, it belongs to different type of insulation. So if you need a special requirements or you don't need, you just depending on your project or your client, we might suggest you each one of them. Of course, the capacity of insulation of different ones are differentiated, as well as the technical specifications. Okay. So it's important for you to understand one really key point here, how to identify just really easy about these panels. Well, as you might see on your left side, we have the sandwich panel, the glass wool type. I have here a sample one. As you might see in the sample, the inside insulation, it's a colored yellow one. And that is a really characteristic that we can find in any of these kind of sandwich panels, no matter the application form. Can be, as in this case, as a wall sandwich panel or as a roof sandwich panel. Okay, the first one. So glass wool, color yellow. The next one we're gonna talk about, it's the sandwich panel, the raw wool. The raw wool, as you can see, is also called fiber of rock, which is basically it can be recognized as the particular color that is a little bit more brown, kind of rock style. And it's important for you to understand this kind of panel has different properties. And please remember how to identify. In this case, the rock wool, it's a different color, a little bit more brownish and greenish color, okay? The third one that we have here is the PUR or PIR. This is basically, it's can be recognized really easy regarding the color of this type. As you can see here in our samples, like the inside is a little bit more white. Sometimes it can be a light yellow, but most of the time it presents this color. So it's really easy to understand what is the difference among them. And finally, of course, it's the EPS, which is a really particular white color. Okay. Finally, well, we're gonna pass also how to describe this sandwich panel. Well, it's really interesting that you can see, for example, as the first part of the sandwich panel, that as the name it is a sandwich. It goes like one top layer of steel, one below a steel layer, and in between of them is the insulation. You can see in this picture that the first part is actually, well, we are gonna call like the top layer, okay? Top layer is basically a PPGI or PPGL steel layer. That means it can be pre-painted galvanized or pre-painted galvanum as well. This one can have different colors. However, the standard of this one, it's usually this tone of RAL 9003, or it can be also 9002 and 1. Follow it, like another part of this is really important. It's regarding the insulation layer. which provide like really particular characteristic of this panel, such as, for example, the thermal insulation, the acoustic insulation, and of course the structural purposes, that is to build and to separate two or more sections of your project. Okay. Lastly, but not least, is the connection. Okay, how we're gonna do the connection? Is it gonna be through more visible one? Is it gonna be more aesthetic ones? It only depends on your project, the application form. For example, if you are gonna do a warehouse or a factory, it doesn't need to be so aesthetic. So we will suggest a different type of this kind of connection. In this case, a visible one. Okay. Another example can be for, let's say, a more architectural project. It might need to be hiding these connections. So we will suggest here along this presentation other type of them. Okay. Following, well, as I was telling you before, this sandwich panel, there are two layers, one on the top, one below, and in the middle you can find the insulation layer. Okay, there are really, let's say, three different key points that I will suggest you from Shanghai Metal that you should always keep in mind in order to identify and also deliver correctly one inquiry. In this case, regarding the sandwich panel, well, how we characterize this sandwich panel? The first one, the top steel layer, we're gonna talk about the thickness of the layer steel. Okay, depending on the type of panel, can go from 0.4 until 0.8, the normal values. Also the sheet profile, as you can see here in the top layer, well, there is a profile over here. Okay, there are different types. It can be flat, it can be like in this kind of slope, it can be a different one. At least there are 4 of 6 types. Next one is gonna be the round color. In case if you really need the sandwich panel be another type of color, we can also deliver. Of course, the cost of different color, different from the standard, will increase the cost of the panel itself. Okay. Regarding the insulation part, well, we will talk about the insulation type. As you remember in the previous slide, we were talking about glass wool or fiber of glass, rock wool or fiber of rock, PUR, PIR, and EPS. Okay, these are the, let's say, the 4 big families. Okay. Also, we're gonna request like how thick is gonna be this panel. Okay, how thick we're gonna have regarding the thermal insulation, or maybe the structural requirements that you might have in your project. Originally and typically goes from 50 to 250 millimeters. That is the maximum, let's say. But of course, if you have any other inquiry, we can also deliver some feasibility, technical feasibility in that case. Last but not least, in this case of the insulation, is the density. These two factors, well, along with the thickness of the panel, the density is really important because the more dense you have your panel, of course, the properties, the thermal insulation is going to be better. Let's say if we have a rock wool 100 kilograms per square meter per cubic meter, will not have the same performance as a 150. Of course, the 150, it's more dense, it's more packed, so the material can absorb more the heat, in this case, of separating the compartment in your project, and it can give you better performance in terms of energy saving, which is really important for the cost, the operational cost of your project. Another thing is important, as I talked to you before, the thickness as well is a really important factor. The thinner one, of course, depending on your requirements, might be best, or maybe you might require a little bit more thicker one in case you might be in like really cold places, or if your compartment needs a really specific thermal insulation properties. Well, the back stick layer has the same requirements as the top one, so, well, just a matter of remembering it's just thickness, also the sheet profile, and last is the color in this case, okay? So remember this really important topic, apart, of course, about the quantity that you might need, expressed in square meters, or if you need it also in this case, in number of pieces, okay? It's really important as well that we have to talk about also the dimensions of this panel, okay? How big is gonna be this panel? Not only the thickness as we talked before, also we need to talk about the width of this panel itself, as well as the length of the panel. These two factors is really also needs to be considered, and it's also regarding your project. Where are you going to install these things? You need the support, the beams, and the profiles, the different drywalls to connect them. That will give us the specification about the width in this case. Okay, typically goes for 800 until 1,000 millimeters. And regarding the length, well, it's really variable. The standard ones goes from 1,000, 1,100, but it can be beyond that thing. So it just depends on your prior requirements. So if you need just one panel of 7 meters length, it's completely feasible. Just send us your inquiry. Okay. Last is the connection. Well, here you can see the thickness, of course, that we talked before. But the connection is another important factor. As we talked before, if it's just a project regarding just a warehouse, of course, you might not need to hide these screws, okay? However, if it's more architectural purposes, you might need to put them covered, as you will see in our slides more further.